I did a PS2 unboxing last week, so I just want to show off some other Japanese PS2 games that I've gotten over the past year, something, I don't know, last little while. So just to briefly go over some background about the PS2, as the story goes, Sony briefly teamed up with Nintendo to create a CD add-on for the Super Famicom / Super Nintendo, but long story short, business relations soured, that idea fizzled out, and Sony independently released the PS1, which not only completely stomped the Nintendo 64, but stomped the entire generation, beginning a historic line of gaming systems, the PlayStation series. So, the even more influential PS2 released in Japan in March 2000, which not only trounced the GameCube and the original Xbox, but is still now the greatest selling system of all time. Though the Switch also got pretty close, but PS2 still stands all the way at the top. It had a DVD player, so like people just bought one even if they weren't going to play games, so that's pretty cool. I've tried asking my mom which Christmas it was that I got a PS2 for, since I was really young, but basically I grew up with a PS2 and a Game Boy Advance, and even though I played some like less common games like the Ape Escape 2s, the SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottoms, as opposed to the Call of Duties and Grand Theft Autos, that nobody my age should have been playing at the time, I still have a great appreciation for the system, and it's been really cool to collect for the PS2. So let's dive into the games, and we're going to start with a super famous game for the system. So the Clock Tower series is a series of point-and-click horror games beginning exclusively in Japan, all the way back on the Super Famicom in April 1995, and didn't come to North America until October 1997 with the second game in the series. The series had a mildly wonky numbering scheme, as that second game was called just Clock Tower in North America, but was technically Clock Tower 2 in Japan, and then the third game in the series didn't have a number in Japan, but then it was called Clock Tower 2 here in North America. So I think the idea was that the games would then perpetually start coming to North America, so they tried to get them on the same numbering system, but that kind of fizzled out because the fourth and final game in the series, and the third game to come to North America, is Clock Tower 3, releasing in Japan in December 2002 and North America in March 2003, being developed and published by the ever-prominent Capcom. So the first three games in the series have a mostly continuous plot, but Clock Tower 3 not only broke away from that story, but was also the only video game that Japanese film director Kinji Fukusaku was in charge of. In this game, you follow the story of a 14-year-old Alyssa Hamilton as she has to go into hiding, but proceeds to time travel to different eras like World War II and the 1960s, freeing souls and destroying enemies with the hopes of reuniting with her mother. So the game is a little closer to a third-person action game rather than the point-and-click nature of the previous three games, but most of your gameplay is avoiding or fighting enemies and solving puzzles. How a 14-year-old girl is capable of taking on horrific and supernatural beings is beyond me, but I can definitely see why this game and series on the whole are cult classics with a very passionate following in the horror game genre. So it's not for me, but that plot sounds pretty neat for anyone who's into that kind of thing. The game didn't sell well, which mostly killed the franchise, but it's been tried to be revived in different ways. So, for example, there's a spiritual successor still on the PS2 called Haunting Ground that released in 2005. That is absurdly expensive. It's like one of the most expensive games on the PS2. And the director from the first two Clock Tower games also kickstarted Nightcry in 2016. But that's about it, unfortunately. So that kind of is sad for horror game fans. But like, I don't know, anytime I think of horror games, like the first two that come to mind are Silent Hill and Clock Tower, even though they have nothing to do with each other. But cool to add a Clock Tower game to the collection. Moving on from one game that is very expensive in North America to another, we have Kiro King Super DX, which initially released on Japanese GameCubes in July 2003, Japanese PS2 in December 2003, and then finally, 11 months after the very original release, released here in North America on GameCubes and PS2 in June 2004 as Ribbit King. So it's developed and published by the also prominent Bandai, but it's basically a golf game, but you are instead playing Frolf. So Frolf is supposed to be like, if you've ever been to a carnival and you play those games where you have to like catapult frogs into different things, like in like, I don't know, some moving water pond, that's what it is. That's how you're golfing, by catapulting frogs. How nice. PETA probably won't have any problem with this, of course. So, much like other child-centric games of the era, a la Backyard Baseball, there are power-ups across 20 holes, plenty of unlockables, and just overall a cute little experience that some kids were probably fortunate enough to enjoy back in the day. And I specifically say some kids because this is a great example of the odd PS2/GameCube game that just no one knew about. So it didn't sell well and wasn't necessarily received perfectly. So while it's got its little following, it seems like the game that is destined for obscurity even today. And like I said, it's also really expensive because it didn't initially sell well. One thing I did find super interesting, though, is that this game is actually a sequel, an update, to a PS1 game that is the exact same nature, but it was called just Kiro Kiro King, left off the Super DX of this Ribbit King title. That released only in Japan in 2000, and there was also a DS game, supposedly in the same series in 2006. That looks like a platformer, but yeah, I did not know this was Ribbit King when I bought it, and this is super cool. So I'm really glad to get this one. Next up is a series that I think I've talked about at some point in the past, but I'll talk about it again. As a kid, I remember seeing Zatch Bell on Cartoon Network. I could not tell you anything about him or about the plot, but his character, the blonde hair, and the name are all forever ingrained into my mind. So anytime I see any form of his media pop up, I'm like, I remember that guy, and that's pretty much it. To me, it's nostalgic to being a kid because I remember it being on Cartoon Network, but that's typically where my connection with the franchise ends until I became an adult, started collecting games, and being overall adjacent to many Japanese media franchises. So I've come across Zatch Bell way more frequently ever since I started collecting. Known as Konjiki no Gash in Japan, the series started with a manga in 2001, but very quickly grew into an anime, as evidenced by me remembering it on Cartoon Network in North America as a kid. So it got over here pretty quick. You follow this little blonde guy, Zatch Bell, as he travels and adventures in a world inhabited by these supernatural Mamodo. And just based on the synopsis, it sounds like it could be a Pokemon game without actually catching the Mamodo. But that's my very, very uneducated opinion. So anyway, there are tons of Zatch Bell games and tons that didn't come to North America, one of which is Konjiki no Gash Bell Yujo Tag Battle, which was also developed and published by Bandai. So the first Zatch Bell game to release on home systems and the second game overall, first one was on GBA, and this was the first in a line of 3 Yujo Tag Battle games, which is a 3D fighting series set in the Zatch Bell universe where you battle in pairs. So Tag Battle, you're battling 2 people at a time. So Zatch's pair is him and Kiyo, who is another main character in the series, I'm pretty sure, and that's all I could find about the game itself. Even the Zatch Bell wiki wasn't that helpful, but it looks like the second Yujo Tag Battle game is a fleshed out version of this. It was called Full Power. And the third game in the Yujo Tag Battle series, the last game technically in the Yujo Tag Battle series, did come to North America on PS2 and GameCube in 2005 under the title Mamodo Battles. So I've stumbled across other Zatch Bell games, but it is still cool to add this one to kind of feel a little nostalgic about being a kid, even though I don't remember Zatch Bell at all plot-wise, but that's still pretty cool. So I'll admit the next several games are a little slow-moving, but that's okay. The Atelier series is a series of JRPGs centered around alchemy, item crafting, and daily objective type of gameplay. Kind of sounds like Animal Crossing if it was a more mature Sony series. So the games themselves are cut into different sub-series with mostly consecutive games. So, for example, from May 2004 to June 2006, it was the Atelier Iris series, which also was the first Atelier series to come to North America. And then 3 of the 4 Atelier games from September 2019 to March 2023 had the Atelier Ryza title. So here we have Lily no Atelier Salberg no Renkin Jutsushi 3, which is the final game in the first Atelier subseries, The Alchemist of Salberg, which began on PS1, had the first sequel, number 2, also on PS1, but then it had this first Atelier game on PS2. So last game in the sub-series, but the first game to release on PS2 in this series. So lots of context involved in this series so far. The first game in the series follows this bad at alchemy student named Marie in crafting things for the people of Salberg, But this third game follows Lily as she introduces alchemy and helps bring the school Marie attended to prominence. So that's like a really fun tie into the story. So like, imagine the backstory to like Hogwarts starting up. I believe that's kind of what the story is, centering around Lily as opposed to Marie. So you can't lose in the game, which is a recurring theme of a lot of games in the Atelier series. The only negative is that you could just get a bad ending where you fail your classes. But otherwise, I would have loved to give you more info, but the Atelier wiki sent me right into a "your computer is infected" page, so that's where we're going to have to end with this one. But it is still cool to add an Atelier game to the series. I see them all the time, and there's a lot of games on Switch, I'm pretty sure, and I didn't really know anything about it until I researched for this one, so that's cool. Next up is NBA Live 2001. Okay, moving on. The next game is a game we talked about sort of way back in the first episode of Nihon no Konyo Shoukai. At the time, I talked about the Famicom game Tower of Druaga that was fairly influential in dungeon crawlers and roguelikes, and now almost 2 years later, I'm showing off the sequel to that game, The Nightmare of Druaga Fushigi no Dungeon, which released in July 2004 in Japan and came to North America just 3 months later in October 2004. Developed and published by Arika, who is also the developer of a handful of Street Fighter EX games, a handful of Tetris games, and also the author to the 3D Classic series on 3DS, so that's pretty cool. This game can probably be best described as an extremely difficult reimagining, fleshing out of the original game. So the gameplay on the Famicom gameplay on the Famicom version was way more simple in comparison, and this game just improves, having 3 generations of hardware to upgrade with, and it's just overall more original, more upgrades on the original, has more story, has more free gameplay, and overall just, I think you get the idea. It's got lots of connections to past Babylonian Castle Saga games, like Blue Crystal Rod, which I think we've talked about in some video in the past, and is also considered one of the Mystery Dungeon games that we've talked about so frequently on this channel with Shiren the Wanderer, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. So even though no one knows about this game, it's got some historic value that I find pretty interesting. Probably more interesting than the actual game itself, but nonetheless, still cool to add another Druaga game to the collection, and a weird one at that a little bit. This episode has so much exposition, and we're going to continue with that, talking about Memories Off. So, Memories Off is a seemingly standard visual novel series beginning on the PS1 in Japan in 1999, and having these seemingly very frequent releases over the years, even if one doesn't necessarily stick out amongst the others, that I can tell, at least. I believe it did have a few OVAs based on the games, so that's always cool when like the games came first and other forms of media came second. Anyway, we have Omoide ni Kawaru Kimi Memories Off, which is the 3rd game in the series, releasing on both Dreamcast and PS2 on a North American Thanksgiving 2002, about a boy whose girlfriend leaves him, but then they reconnect in a coffee shop. Fascinating. That's all I was able to find out about the story, but the game was also ported to PSP in August 2008, so like, what even is this? Can anybody teach me something about this? That's all I got, and I don't know, cool to add it. There's so many weird series for us to talk about. We are nearing the end of this video. We got one more game after this next one, but this is the last game I had to research, and it is part of a very expensive game series, so I'll let you take a second, guess what it is. Okay, you have your guess, and I bet you all knew that it was Train Simulator Midosuji Sen, a Japan-only October 2003 train simulator developed by Ongaku-kun and published by SCEI. Ongaku-kun has worked almost exclusively on train simulators, and yes, this is actually expensive. If you go on eBay and look up Train Simulator PS2, you will get some seriously, ridiculously expensive stuff. This one included. So it looks like there are 10 train simulators by Ongaku-kun for Sony systems, and like, that's cool, but what? Why? So to continue the weird, Google also actually gave me an AI overview about this game. It didn't do it for any of the other games in this episode, which is really, really weird. And I don't have anything to say about this game other than it's just a simulator simulating several real-life train lines in Japan. So what is this? I don't know. We'll move on, but like, this is really cool. How much did I pay? Let's just say I paid $100 less than what I could buy it for right now. But not that it's about the money, but that's like really cool. I don't know. It's weird, strange. But anyway, we come to the last game in the episode, and it's one that I'm actually really, really excited to talk about, and that is Frogger Rescue, or Frogger's Adventures the Rescue here in North America. So this game released in 2003 and was developed and published by Konami. But man, I got great memories of this game. Obviously, I didn't play this specific version. I played this North American version, but I have great memories of playing this game with my dad, which he did a lot of with me. So, granted, he grew up with the original Frogger, but this game is a 2D puzzle platformer, and I absolutely love it. I remember the excitement of beating this game with him as a kid. I don't know if he beat the last level or if I beat the last level, but I remember it. And over the pandemic, I played it again just to feel something, and I was reminded how good this game is and how well it holds up. I know I'm like totally glazing a kid's game, but genuinely, it is fantastic. You can easily find it for under $10. So if you want to be like my friend Taylor, who played it because I said so, you definitely won't be disappointed. So I bought this game, I bought this version of the game amidst my like Japanese game hoarding, and I wanted to buy like childhood games that I had in Japanese, and I've so far accomplished doing that so far. And yeah, this was cool, but it was like $80, man. That's like absurd. But yeah, it is cool to get the Japanese version of a game that I am so fond of, have so many good memories with, and I really can't stress enough how much you should try Frogger's Adventures the Rescue. It's on PS2, it's on GameCube, so strongly recommend go give it a shot. But anyway, that's it. That's all I got. This episode was a roller coaster. Some like super famous games, some weird cult classics, some games that I couldn't say anything about. But thank you so much for coming on this roller coaster with me. I hope you learned something. And if there's anything I got wrong about some of these games, or info you want to share about some of these games, because like I said, I couldn't say a lot about some of them, please let me know. I would love to continue learning about these games as much as I have hopefully taught you something. So with that said, from Frogger and I, bye.